2 guys in one day, you're practically the Bachelorette.
I know, right?
So, who gets the final rose?
Jesus, Stef, and Lena have a breakthrough while Mariana juggles multiple suitors. Let's break down Season 5, Episode 11 of The Fosters, titled Invisible, right here on What Happened. Hey everyone, Lisa here and welcome back to another Foster's Recap. So this episode was pretty jam-packed as it seemed like all our main characters got a little bit of the spotlight this time around. Now the issue of Anchor Beach going private or not finally comes back up, and while the students ultimately vote no, something else throws a wrench in their plans of them winning overall. Jude is also back and finally tells Taylor his deal with imminent power and meets a popular gamer that he's going to be working with. Jesus returns to school, Callie tries to decide how to fill out her application for UCSD, and Brandon struggles with whether or not to be intimate with Grace. So let's break down this episode in a little more detail. First, let's talk about our boy Jude, who is finally getting his storyline brought back up. At school, Jude finally tells Taylor about working with imminent power, which she is not too thrilled about. He thinks she should be happy for him because it's something he really wants to do and she's his best friend, so she should be happy for him. Whereas she says that because he's her best friend, he shouldn't want to do it without her. The next day though, Jude does in fact meet with Declan Rivers, the gamer that imminent power wants him to play with. They actually hit it off, especially when Jude points out a Galaxy Quest joke that Declan made in one of his streams. The two chat and Declan thinks they'll work well together and Jude can be like his nerdy sidekick. Jude then asks Declan what he'd do if he wanted to do something, but it means he might lose a friend. Declan doesn't really hesitate and says, well, he'd pick his friend. Jude then explains that's why he's having a problem saying yes to working with Declan, and he explains the whole situation with Taylor, and Declan just says, you know, why don't we work together? Like, do it all three of us. Jude explains he's already pitched that, and they said no, but Declan, he has a solution. He says he'll ask because they won't say no to him because he's used to getting what he wants. Well, by now, as you watch this whole scene play out, you can tell what Declan really wants, and what he really wants is Jude. Like, from the moment Jude brought up the Galaxy Quest joke, Declan had his sights set on him. So if Declan can pull it off for Taylor to be part of their group, will that actually fix this whole problem for Jude and her? I think it will, but it also means that there's probably going to be trouble for Jude and Noah as a result. Next up, Brandon and Grace. Their couple time hits a bump in the road thanks to Susan moving in. When Susan goes out to get the delivery guys who have her fold-out couch, Grace tells Brandon one of her main concerns with her mom moving in is basically how will they find time to be alone to have sex? Well, to make things even more awkward for us and for the delivery guys, Susan walks in and overhears Grace and basically says sex is out of the question, which Grace is not too happy about. Brandon is at home later Googling if he can have sex with someone with leukemia when Stef walks in to check on him and ask about Grace. Stef tells Brandon that they're proud of him for supporting Grace, but he also needs to work on supporting himself and making a plan for college for the next year. Brandon drops a bomb that Stef doesn't seem too happy about when he says he's not going to college next year and he's going to devote himself to supporting Grace. Later on, Brandon and Grace finally have some alone time at her place and they're trying to get it on, but it turns out just being very awkward as Brandon is pretty hesitant about having sex. Grace feels frustrated and goes to the bathroom and basically thinks that Brandon isn't attracted to her now that he knows she's sick. Brandon of course insists this is not true, but he's just worried about hurting her because of all the stuff he's read on the internet. Grace just points out that she knows herself and she knows that if something doesn't feel right, she won't hesitate to tell him, so they should be fine. Now all of this makes Brandon feel a little bit better, and the two basically take advantage of the time that they have alone before Grace's mom returns. For Stef, she spends a lot of the episode distracted and more frequently forgetting to breathe, as they called it in the last episode. So this makes me wonder if all the focus on this particular thing will bring back up her health issues. She had a cancer scare back in season 3 and they said that she had stage 0 breast cancer, meaning she didn't have cancer, but she ran the risk of abnormal cells turning into cancer in the future. So is this what's causing her shortness of breath moments? Mike also mentioned in the last episode that Stef used to have this issue back when they were married, and they're emphasizing the sound of the heartbeat during these moments. So is Stef sick with a heart problem instead? All I know is that with the show ending soon, they better not be trying to go for some kind of tragic ending to bring everyone together or something. I just really want Stef to be okay. For Callie, Aaron, and Jimena, Callie and Aaron are still dealing with being just friends, although he hasn't quite grasped what that means. Like, there's no hand-holding and no surprise picnics on the beach, but of course, hugs are allowed. Jimena is still stuck in the church and she's kind of going a bit stir-crazy. She feels like she's losing her mind in the church and she still hasn't heard anything from her lawyer. When she finally does hear from her lawyer, it is not good news. He tells her that her DACA status hasn't been renewed yet and it may never be unless she gets a special hearing. Jimena now is pretty upset because she knows she can't walk out of that church without being detained, and she's worried she'll never see her parents again. She just feels very trapped. Callie is also dealing with what to do about her application to UCSD. She tells Aaron during their beach picnic that she's decided to go and apply for social work just to get into UCSD, and then she'll transfer to the art program so she can take more time with filling out her portfolio. She is just going to play it safe for now, it seems, and Aaron, he supports her with this. When Callie is visiting Jimena at the church later, though, Helen, the art teacher, comes to bring Jimena supplies for her assignments, and Callie tells the teacher of her plans. Helen explains that it's not really the way to go because they take very few transfers, as they want people who are committed to art from the beginning. So Callie has a better chance of getting in if she applies straight to the College of Art and Design now. Callie then goes to see Aaron to seek out even more advice, but she sees him going into his apartment with another woman, so she returns home instead and starts to work on her portfolio by drawing some still lifes in the bathroom. When Callie later goes to see Jimena again and they're roller skating around the church, Callie brings up how courageous Jimena is, and Jimena asks Callie what's going on with UCSD. Callie once again says she's worrying and doesn't know what to do, and she just doesn't have confidence. Jimena tells her that sometimes you have to take a risk, as she knows from her life, obviously, and she knows Callie, and that all you need is courage, and Callie has a lot of it. This pep talk seems to work as we see Callie later filling out her UCSD application, and she selects the School of Art and Design and submits it. We pan back and see that Aaron is actually sitting in the room with her, and he's actually really proud of her and supporting her, even though he kind of advocated a little bit more for the social work route. Callie then asks Aaron who the girl was the other day, and he says it was just his friend Gabriella, and she has nothing to worry about because he's not interested in dating anyone else right now. And then they go on to discuss, the ins and outs of their being just friends and the relationship and dating stuff. As far as the mess Mariana gets herself into, she pretty much goes from having no guys interested in her to having 3, or I guess 4 if you count Nick. Wyatt brings her an edible arrangement to say sorry for being strunk, aka stoned and drunk at prom, and he actually asks her out on a real date. Then Logan shows up on her front porch asking if she wants to go for a run and saying he dumped Olivia, or he and Olivia broke up. Mariana tries to play it off like she wasn't trying to, be interested in Logan, and he says, you know what, if you were trying to get with me, I wouldn't have minded it. Then Matt comes back in the picture saying what he finally wanted to say at prom. He apologizes for breaking up with her and being jealous and insecure, and all that happened with the whole Nick situation. He then asks if there's any way she'd give him another chance. Mariana's now in quite the predicament, so she asks him if she can answer him later, and he says take all the time you need, and she walks away, but she walks away with a smile on her face, and I don't really like that smile on Mariana's face because usually that means she ends up getting herself into some kind of trouble or some kind of dramatic situation, and I feel like that's going to happen with all these guys, but hopefully that doesn't happen and she just chooses one. I kind of want her to choose Matt though, so fingers crossed for that one. For Jesus, he's finally going back to school, and Poppy is also joining him by transferring to the school, and she's going to be in a lot of his classes. Jesus will have his paraprofessional David with him, who's going to be going to classes with him. Jesus doesn't really seem sold on the idea. When he and Poppy get to their first class, they plan to sit together in the back of the classroom, but David is right there waiting for Jesus, saying he saved them seats in the front of class. Jesus seems to be having trouble focusing during his classes and his tests, and David, we learn, is pretty strict, which is just making Jesus more frustrated. The teachers, though, are being pretty nice and lenient towards Jesus, giving him extra time to finish his tests and kind of less work for homework, which the other kids end up making fun of Jesus for, saying, maybe we should have gotten hit in the head too to get less work. When Jesus returns home from his first day back at school, Stef and Lena ask him how it was, and, Jesus just says David was annoying, but Lena tells him to give him a chance. We get to see the soft side of Jesus later when he sweetly asks Poppy how her first day at school was. She says it was fine, but the only people to talk to her at school were also the same people who live in the house. She then opens up about how much she misses her parents and how worried she is, and all of that and the stress that she's going through, and Jesus gives her a sweet hug as a friend. We then see Poppy open her eyes though, and Emma is watching because she's been over helping Mariana, and Jesus just explains that Poppy's going through a lot right now, and Emma says she gets it, but it makes me wonder if she really does. Like, we've seen jealous Emma before, and I really don't want to see that whole storyline again. I feel like they've done it so many times. So let's just hope they don't go that route, and Jesus and Poppy really are just friends, because it seems like they have a nice friendship going on. They're the only two who kind of understand each other right now, and I don't feel like there's any other intentions right now. Maybe there were when Poppy first met Jesus, but she saw how much Jesus likes Emma, so I kind of don't think she's going to get in the way with that. She kind of has a lot to deal with when it comes to her family instead. The next day at school, Jesus can't seem to get his combination for his locker to work, and he starts to get frustrated, forgetting which locker is his. He tries the combination on every locker, and by the time he's done with that, the bell rings and David comes out yelling at him, asking why he's not in class. After school, Stef and Lena take Jesus to a support group for people with TBI. Jesus tries to act all tough, saying he doesn't need to be there at this meeting, but he listens to another girl share her story and how she feels having TBI and how other people make her feel, and how she would much rather, be alone, and how people don't understand TBI because it's not a visible disability, and all of this kind of stuff that Jesus slowly starts to really relate to. And you can see him throughout the meeting get more emotional, and eventually he starts crying and he leaves the room.
Like I can't do it, or like I'm bad or broken or something.
Honey, you're not broken. You're not. And I promise you that we're gonna stop making you feel that way.
Now what's going on with all this school drama? Lena and Monty talk to Monica Davis, the one board member who is still kind of undecided about her vote, and Lena manages to convince her to vote their way. Now it's up to the students, and at lunch, Mariana's rival from STEM tries to persuade the kids in favor of all the great things they'll get with Anchor Beach if it goes private, while Mariana gets up and explains why the school that they have now is perfect the way it is, and how private school education is not necessarily better. When she gets home, she and Emma email all the kids in school to remind them about the vote the next day. Mariana ends up revealing to Emma that she did in fact text Nick back, but only to see if he would tell her what he knew. When Nick said that he could only tell her in person, Mariana decided she wasn't going to text him again, and she blamed everything on just being really stressed over the school vote. Well, it turns out the student vote goes their way, and now it's up to the board to vote the next day to determine the final outcome. Unfortunately, Lena kind of shows her hand to a snotty board member by saying they have enough votes now that they persuaded Monica to vote their way. Well, that snotty board member has a card up her sleeve and brings up Monty's new job, and how the head of the board at the new school that Monty wants to go to was actually her sorority sister, and that if Monty doesn't resign and give up her vote, which would go to Drew, she'll call the head of the board over at the other school and basically make it so Monty can't get a job there. So there's really no win in this situation for Monty. Lena ends up telling Mariana back at home that there's nothing they can do and Monty is going to resign, which gives Drew her vote. She then says that they lost unless some board members manage to change their minds before the vote tomorrow. Mariana is now back to feeling stressed over this situation, and it's no surprise that it drives her to do what she said she wouldn't. She texts Nick saying she'll meet him, but it has to be first thing in the morning. He responds saying that his dad leaves by 8 a.m. We then end the episode with Nick opening the door to his house smiling, but that smile quickly fades.
I understand you have some information that can save Anchor Beach.
All I have to say is thank God Mariana did the right thing and told Lena, or at least I'm assuming that's how it all went down. Let's hope that, Mariana's kind of wisened up a little. Now we just kind of have to wait to see if Nick is still going to give Lena the information, because we know he kind of just wanted Mariana. Performance-wise, I think that Noah and Terry really stood out for me this episode. They had, in my opinion, the most emotional stuff this episode, and I think they handled it so well. Now, let's see what's in store for next week's episode.
Listen, all of you asked me out, and it's all new, and nothing serious yet, or again, and, I don't see why I can't date all of you. Not like at the same time, but like one-on-one. Okay, if you're not cool with that, I totally understand, but I'm not ready to be tied down.
I'm cool with that. Yeah, I'm down.
Alright, so what do you think is really going to happen with Anchor Beach? Does the fate of the school really depend on Nick? Which guy will Mariana pick? Will Callie be able to finish her portfolio in time? And what is really going on with Stef? Let me know all your thoughts and concerns and theories about this episode and all those questions down in the comments below. And after that, you click right over here for even more of my videos, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new ones. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for another Foster's Recap, and I'll see you guys next time.